Welcome to the Culture is Healing podcast, brought to you by Checking In. At Checking In, we create customized wellness tools for First Nations communities, centering each nation's language, culture, and traditions to support healing and well-being for their people. To learn more about our work at Checking In, please visit our website at checkingin.co. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. Haichka. Each well, Antapa Hokulitsa, Neat Staminis, Halalt, Kowitson, Lyaxin. Hello, everyone. My traditional name is Hokulitsa. My English name is George Harris Jr., and I'm calling today from my home here in Staminis. This is the community that my father is from. This is the community that my mother married into. And this is the community that my siblings and I were raised in. I belong to George Harris Sr. and my late mother, Sylvia Harris. My grandparents from my father's side of my family are the late Lawrence and Irene Harris. My grandparents from my mother's side of my family are the late Bernard and Nora George. My familial connections to Halalt come from my mother, Sylvia, and my grandmother, Nora. My familial connections to Cowitson come from my grandfather, Bernard. Through both sides of my family, I have familial connections to Lyaxin. And my name, Hoklitsa, it's a name that's been passed down throughout my family from generation to generation. My father carries the name. He has passed the name on to myself as well as a few other family members. And welcome everyone to the Culture is Healing podcast. And I am your host, Hokulitsa. And I'm honored to be able to share with you all today. My guest, Gabe, is a near and dear friend to my family. And I look forward to the conversation today, bro. And I'll pass it over to Gabe to introduce himself to you all. Haichka.
Hi, Jowick. Eats Apueliol, Antha Tsetsawanu, Gabriel George Quanasqui, Tanitsanat, Saathnuts, Tanitsanat Saliowatak, Heights Ap Awish, Heights Ap Kasi. I'm Gabriel George. I'm Tsleil-Waututh Nation member coming to you by way of Saathnuts, also known as the Burrard Inlet Indian Reserve number 3, and it's good to be here with you today, George, and with all of your viewers and listeners.
Haichka. Yeah, thank you so much, Gabe, for taking the time to come and sitting in circle and have a meaningful conversation. It's amazing. I love the connections we share. I know I was introduced to you through my uncle Tom, and that was quite a number of years ago now. I won't say any numbers so we don't age ourselves too much here. But I've known you for quite a while, and I look forward to sitting down with you here today and to sharing some of the knowledge and some of the culture that we can share. And so we'll hop right into it. And I know had the opportunity to share with you over the last little while here about our podcast, and the one of the things that means a lot to me and to a lot of our people, that understanding that culture is healing. And there are so many amazing stories of our people engaging in our cultural ways to bring healing to our people, through ceremony. And specifically, I'm thinking about the efforts that are going into revitalizing our language. And that's helping to promote healing, and also the cultural aspect of it and that cultural connection we get from going back to our roots. and I love hearing your introduction and speaking our native tongue. That means a lot to me, and so thank you for sharing. And I'd love to hear, when we say a culture is healing, what does that mean to you, Gabe?
Yeah, culture is healing. It means a lot to me. I think being like first generation, my family to not attend
Mm,
residential schools, definitely felt and suffered some of the effects of those schools
mm-hmm,
in my home at a young age, early childhood traumas.
mm-hmm,
And, you know, when you grow up, it's just like this is normal. You don't know that, maybe some of what you're experiencing is hurt and pain, or, you don't have a. But to me, I think that is the culture is what really saved me. And
mm,
so when I think of culture and healing, I think about my family's culture. Like in the time that I grew up, I was embarrassed to be Huelmuch, embarrassed to be native. But our family, my late grandfather, Chief Dan George, he had this dance group he started in the 50s, and once a year they'd come into the school, and I think through that I started to gain a sense of pride
mm,
in who I was. And so I think my grandfather had the foresight to create this group in the early 50s, maybe late 40s. This is around the time when the potlatch laws were ending.
mm-hmm,
But in that, he captured a lot of our teachings, our stories, our history. And I think connecting to that and being raised in that really helped me set me on my healing path. So I think of a lot of things, but that's one of the things I think about when I hear culture is healing.
mm. Yeah, that's amazing. And I know, like, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm the first. Me and my sisters in our family. We're the first to not have to go to residential school or day school, and yeah, we're cycle breakers for sure.
Yeah.
We're taking that time to really engage in our culture, and I know for me, being able to see our our young people really engaging in culture is really uplifting my heart for sure. I know my um Pi and Chris's youngest, Annalise. She just had a birthday party um, last week on Monday, and they were asking her what she wanted to do, and she wanted to have a jam session for her birthday. So everyone, they all brought their drums and sang and danced, and that was so amazing to hear about, and just to be able to say that's what our young one wanted to do for to celebrate her birthday.
Yeah.
And that's something that our parents didn't have the ability to do because of the harshness that they experienced in residential schools, and the racism and that they faced in the world. And we're not saying that it doesn't exist, it's just becoming less and less. And you and myself and our generation are the ones who are at the forefront of making that change in this world. And
Yeah.
really raise my hands to you, brother, for the work that you're doing to really make sure that our language still exists. And I love hearing you speak it. That's absolutely amazing. And yeah, and so it's really cool to be able to be part of that
Yeah.
work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the same. I have a lot of love and respect for you, for the, incredible family that you come from, and the generosity of your family. So,
Mm,
and it's evident in this, even in this work you're doing, this Culture is Healing podcast. These are important conversations and important, yeah, important work. So
mm,
back at you.
Hi, brother. Yeah, it's really cool. yeah, I never thought that this would be something that I get to do for work, and I absolutely love it now. It's been an amazing process, and I love hearing other people's perspectives and hear their stories, and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so as we're taking a deeper dive into culture, I was going to ask you, what are some like cultural activities that you've had the ability to partake in or witness that um, hold a special place in your heart.
Yeah. I think the Taiwish, the war canoe racing,
Mm,
was really a kind of a first step into a more serious practice of our culture.
mm-hmm,
The elders, it was mainly actually my late uncle, Bobby George, Robert George, and my late father, Leonard George, that really, and also my late uncle, Iggy George, as well.
mm-hmm,
And that really took me under their wing. My late uncle Bob, talked to me about if I'm going to start paddling, just the discipline around it, the diet that we had to. This was back in, I think, 90 or 91 when I started, and there, um, just the discipline around it with the diet, the exercise, and just being on the water. It really changed me. It's one of those sports. It's either you kind of love it or you don't like it at all.
mm-hmm,
You maybe even almost hate it. It's like you put that paddle in your hand, and it's kind of either, my experience in the time that I did it is, people either love it or they're not feeling it at all. So,
mm-hmm,
and I just fell into that category where I just absolutely fell in love with it, and being on the water, and just there's so many teachings around it. Like, my uncle would tell me that I'd have to go up into the creek, and in the springtime, where my reserve is on the north shore of Vancouver, the water's really cold. The snow's
mm-hmm,
melting off of Seymour and Grouse, and was told, we got to go early in the morning and bath in the creek. And
mm-hmm,
I'd never heard of that. I'd never really done it before, but I just listened to them, and would go and do that. And my uncle would say, brush off with the cedar boughs.
mm-hmm,
But he'd even go further to say, when you're canoe training, to use any of the boughs, like the hemlock or fir,
mm-hmm,
or that he said that would help your muscles, help your body to heal. And just the approach to it, it's not like a normal sport. Like the way I was taught, the paddle has a spirit,
mm-hmm,
the canoe has a spirit. And if you can connect to that canoe, you connect to your paddle, you connect to the water. Um, it's different, it's like you become that achichotil paddling together,
mm-hmm,
or natsamats to squello. And sometimes in our team we get that. So it wasn't, winning was super important, but it wasn't always that. It was just, if you could get this feeling sometimes, like yourself, the ones in the canoe, and the canoe itself is like you became one. When you're racing, people know any sport that you race, whether it's running or biking, or it's, you're kind of putting your body through a lot of pain,
mm-hmm,
but in those moments where things would just come together in that sort of prayer, in that state, sort of transcend all of that, really. And so, to put Western terminology on it, it's more contemplative, the approach that I was taught to canoeing. And in that, I gained healing. I
mm-hmm,
became a dad at a really young age. I think I was just turned 20, and I was like a kid, really. And when my oldest was born, she'll be 33 this December. So, um, so, and then I had a son as well back in that time. And then not long, a few years after my son was born, my first marriage came to an end, and I was left with my two older children. So single dad, but the breakup was very devastating for me. It was very hard, and I became suicidal. I was really struggling, and I think it was, but I just kept, going through everything. And And the next the the ceremonies in the winter helped me a lot. And then the next spring, the canoeing came, and I started doing that. And it was I was still hurting. Like it was. I learned later that it wasn't just um, the trauma of the breakup. It's like once I started to dive deeper into
Mm,
myself, but it took a lot of years to do that. I learned that it was also opening up other traumas that I had, childhood traumas. I
mm,
learned that in my work that I have attachment traumas, and the effects that has. I was like lived my life not knowing at this time, but until I was much older, that I was living in deep fear and deep frozen feelings, that I just thought that was normal. I didn't have a name for it even.
mm,
But back in this time, I think it was just doing the paddling. Because I was a single dad, like my own late father, my routine was like he'd come up at 5 a.m.
mm,
Because my kids were sleeping. Fortunately, I lived across the street from him and my mom, and then he'd come up and often just go to sleep on the couch. I'd go out in the canoe, come back, he'd tag off. I'd get my kids ready for school.
mm,
And I'd go for work, and then depending on the day, like and then after work, sometimes my brother would help um, with my younger son, and after work, my mom would take over. Then I'd go out and do the canoe practice,
mm,
and then I'd gather my kids back up, and I'd go to a local park here on the North Shore where there was just a mini stadium, so that if it was raining, my kids could be under the stadium, and then I'd do my road work.
mm,
I'd go home and do my running. Right.
mhm,
Sometimes it was on the stairs at that stadium, or there was a track there,
mhm,
and so and then the races come and attend the races. But this particular season, I was really hurting. I was feeling suicidal. I didn't want to be here anymore. I actually had a 308 that was gifted to me, and I had a plan that maybe I could just use it on myself. And it was a hard time. And I remember going out in the canoe one morning, and I think it must have been. It was still dark when I was heading out. I remember that going out in the single, and then coming back, and then I came home, and my dad left, and then I think I was tired. I'd been training a lot, almost like
mhm,
overtraining, and I felt really tired, and I kind of fell asleep on the couch. And then when I was sleeping, it's like I had this dream. I was kind of like half awake, but I had this dream. I was standing on the shore in front of my house. I live just across the street from the ocean. I can see it from my house, and it was still dark in my dream, like when I first set out in the canoe that morning, and the waves were lapping. And
mhm,
you can't when you go down there now, because of all the pollution, and even back in this time, you wouldn't see the what do they call that at the uh, the luminescence, the
mm,
in the ocean that you see,
mhm,
because of by that time it was already Burrard Inlet is like it became so polluted. But in my dream, I saw that
mhm,
that light in the waves,
mhm,
and then it's like I went down under the water into this like almost like tunnel. And when I got down there, it was like I was in this longhouse, and I couldn't really see the people, but there was a lot of them, and
mm,
they were just kind of like touching me, and then I just woke up, and something in me just kind of just shifted after that. It was like I was feeling so much pain and so much hurt, and then it was like you know I felt okay, and I really that feeling of being okay, I credit to that approach that my elders gave me to this sport of canoeing, to be
mm,
spiritual, to be mindful, to be respectful when I get in the canoe, to have a prayer, to believe in that canoe as a being, as a spiritual thing, to have a prayer for the water, all these things that I did. And I think that that's the gift that I got in return, is that healing. And so that really like opened my eyes to just how incredible like our ways of being can be, our our siwan us all in our old people's way of thinking about things.
Mm.
The Snowayach,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different understandings for Snowayach, but one that I've been given is the root word is sinut, which is like to put inside. And ech is the suffix for ceremony or for children.
Mm.
And so one way that I've been taught to interpret it is Snowayach is what we put inside our children.
Mm.
And so that's what was some of what was put inside me around the canoe. It turned out it was something that helped me from really, leaving this world. And, imagine I would have made my children orphans and just how, you know, the impact of that would have been. And I think because of canoeing, like I'm still here. And although I don't practice it anymore, it's the lessons that I learned from it, the
Mm.
discipline, the prayers, it is what still sustains me now
Mm-hmm.
in my work.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. The cultural ways of being, saved you, and that's exactly the things I love to hear. There's so many hardships that our people face in this world, and we look back to our traditional ways of being is is powerful. I know I was just up in Kwakwaka'wakw territory
Mm,
last week, and we were over in Numgeese there, and we were visiting one of the wellness center up there, and um, we stayed overnight in over in Numgeese, and
mm,
um, at the end of our meeting, the wellness worker invited myself and my friend Sean, who I was there with, to join her and the relatives up there to join in a morning bath.
mm,
And so that was I felt very powerful, and they're a little bit different than our Coast Salish ways, but there's still the fundamental teachings are still there.
yeah.
They brush off with cedar, when they're doing their spirit bath, and
Mm,
it was powerful.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so we definitely enjoyed it, and I love sharing the fact that I was feeling okay, and yet still was able to release a lot more things than I had initially anticipated.
Mm,
And I felt, I left Numgeese there, and I felt so much lighter. Like
mm,
there was a weight lifted off my shoulders and off my sleeve, my soul, and I don't know, the last little while I'd been thinking about my late mom quite a bit, and it
mm,
was very fitting that after we were done our bath, the wellness worker goes, "Oh yeah, we're sharing with the relatives today. We're talking about grief and loss." And I was just like,
mm,
"Oh well, that's very fitting." I was like, that's what I was dealing with, and so it was like,
mm,
yeah, Creator works in amazing ways, and it was just what I needed that day.
wow.
So it was very powerful, and even thinking of some of the cultural things that I've got to partake in and witness. One of the things that really uplifted my spirits is, at Uncle Tom's wedding.
Mm,
My dad had it um, set in his heart that he wanted to share the his honor celebration song. So we sang
mm,
to Uncle Tom and Auntie Elaine, and that was powerful. That felt really good for us to be able to share that and
mm,
honor them in their journey, and yeah, it was awesome. And that I think that meant a lot to Auntie Elaine and Uncle Tom. So that
mhm.
was something that really uplifted my spirits for sure. So yeah.
Yeah. No, it was very special to be there. And like I said, connecting with your Uncle Tom, he's really shared a lot with me.
Hmm.
And in that connection, I did, and like I said, like you said, I got to know you and your mom, and you mentioned her, and it brought me back to when I was at um, a ceremony at Mission Minimum. It's called now. I think it back then it might have been called Ferndale Minimum Security in the Fraser Valley and in the city of Mission. And your mom was there, your dad. And after the ceremony, your mom kind of called me over and sat me down. I remember
Mm,
sitting beside her on a bench, and what she said to me just really stuck with me. She, it's like she could read me like an open book,
mm,
the gifts that your mom had and
mm-hmm,
who she was as a person. And so, she read me just like you'd open a book and see the words,
mm-hmm,
and she sat me down and she said, you're a good person, Gabe. You're a good man and you're really worthy. You're worthy of good things and you're a good man. And it really touched me
mm,
because I think like self-esteem has been a struggle for me most of my life, my self-esteem. And it's like those words that she left with me really imprinted on me, and I never forget them, and she really encouraged me in the work that Tom was showing me.
mm,
She made me feel strong and she made me feel special. And yeah, being at your family's wedding, at Tom's, your Uncle Tom's wedding,
mm-hmm,
I consider him, he's an important, very important person in my life, Tom and Elaine.
mm-hmm,
And it was healing to be there, just to see the legacy and to see not only the union of such a beautiful couple, but just that legacy piece as well of seeing Tom pass some of those sacred inheritances down,
mm,
to the next generation, that it's going to continue, and to see your family there coming together and sharing your names and, standing each other up and supporting and loving that, not being sort of greedy with what you have, but being giving.
mm,
And that's the way I understand it from my uncle and my family, that we were generous with our family connections and our wealth. And I witnessed that
mm,
with your family names, and how that continued on. And so it was a really healing day and a good day to be with friends and
mm-hmm.
a good day to have some Chilliwack corn and
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and some of the other good food.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's always one of the foundational pieces in our traditional gatherings is always some good food kicking around to eat. So
Yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and thinking about some of our traditions and our culture and language and teachings, and those are very impactful for us. And you're sharing some of those teachings that really, still hold you up today. I was wondering if you'd be able to share, some of those teachings that have had that lasting impression on your life and really helped form who you are.
yeah. A couple things come to mind. Like you mentioned the language, and that's, I in my family, like in my grandparents' generation, my grandpa Dan and his brothers and sisters, they spoke multiple languages.
Mm,
Some of them three or four languages, and English being one of them, Chinook being another, and then Hunkaminam and Squamish and some even more,
mm,
right? And then they were the first generation to go to residential school. Then you get to my dad's generation, and only one person
mm,
spoke any language in our community, my late Uncle Bob. And then my generation, no one, right? So
mm,
it kind of just obliterated the language within just like a generation and a half, really, um, within my family. And I spent a lot of time with my Uncle Bob, and I remember him telling us, like, if you're going to get really serious about spirituality, you need to learn the language.
mm,
And I was pretty young, and it didn't really register with me. I heard it, you know, and then he passed away. And then I remember being in ceremony up in the Fraser Valley, and the speaker from the island came in, and he came in kind of late, and it was crowded. So we ended up sitting together. He ended up in our section, and it quieted down, and the meal was coming out, and he's like, "Aren't there any speakers up here?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, there's some speakers up here, yeah."
mm,
And I, so and so, so and so. And just no, like speakers in the language. And I was like, oh, and it just kind of, the weight of that just really hit me. I was like,
Mm.
um, no, not really, not in our big houses at that time. There wasn't really any I could think of. He said, it's too bad. Like there should be somebody from here using the language. And it's just like, he just put this weight on my chest. And I was like,
Mm.
and then my uncle's words came back to me. And I was like, from there, I just walked away and I was determined to learn the language, you know?
Mm.
And in that work in the language, it's just transformed my healing, you know, and my connection to the ancestors. And so it's been um, an amazing journey. And watching, you know, we know because we're like the most studied people on the planet, right? Canadian
Mm.
Indigenous people, Canadian Indians, Aboriginal, First Nation, you know, whatever it is, you know, you want to call it, as long as you're respectful. We have many terms we've been given over the years, right?
Mm.
Huelmuch, right? So, you know, we're the most studied people on the planet. So all this information is out there, like, yes, you know, language, reduce suicide, reduce addictions, all this stuff, healing. But actually bringing language into my community and seeing the way it transformed our youth,
Mm.
seeing the way, like, once language is put into someone, just how it accelerates the learning, and
Mm.
seeing like the change in self-esteem, the, you know, people coming, leaving their addictions behind,
Mm.
people that were suicidal, not suicidal. It was just incredible to see. And so, like, language has been a huge passion of mine in
Mm.
the last little bit of my life. So I think about that, and then I think about, or I have another thought. It's completely different. I can stop there, or I can just keep rolling into the
Well,
other
keep on
kind
rolling,
of.
brother.
Okay, yeah. Another thing that I used to share a lot, and then I kind of forgot, and then um, I was at I forget where I was speaking, but it came back to me. But my dad told me that his grandmother had this teaching about our spirit and how we're supposed to take care of our spirit.
Mm.
And what she said is, like, we all come from like a spirit world. Say if this is like the spirit world, and then we kind of enter, we enter this world. And she said, when we enter this world, we basically make a big circle.
Mm.
That's our journey. So when we enter this world, she said, we're still our spirit, and we have a spirit inside of us, and our spirit is still close to the spirit world when we first enter this world. So when we're children, when we're newborn, if it's, you know, there's, you know, minus any of the trauma which many of us in our generation experienced, and probably in our parents' generation they probably experienced worse,
Mm.
maybe not for some, maybe some have experienced worse than their parents, but you get the idea. But when you first enter this world, your spirit is still close
Mm.
to where it feels at home. So she said your spirit feels home in the spirit world, and then you start your journey and you travel along. And when you get out to be like a teenager, she said the Hunitum would call it like teenage depression.
Mm.
But she said it, what happens is your spirit starts to, it gets too far away from home, and that it'll start to get sad and lonely, and it'll always yearn to go back home.
Mm.
And so what she said is, you know, that you got to fill yourself with our cultural ways, with our songs, like what we experienced at the wedding when your family got up and shared those beautiful songs. Nilkos, Hahush Alap. You know, you filled all of us
Mm.
with, you filled our spirit. You made our spirit feel at home here, right? And so that's what she said. In order to fight that depression,
Mm.
you got to do things that make your spirit feel at home. And my dad would take that further and say that that would include long distance running, or sweat lodges, or smudging,
Mm.
fasting, singing, dancing. You know, I think even higher learning, you know, things that you can really entrench yourself in to make your spirit feel more at home. And so, and then you go along in your path, you become an adult, and that's when you try to help. And if you're lucky, you'll come all the way back around to be an elder. And then that stage, you're close to home again.
mm,
and you're in a different place in your life. So I always think about that in terms of our culture. What's one of the reasons we do it? Well, that's one of my understandings why we do it. It's to make our spirit feel home here
mm,
on this earth walk that we do, because our spirit's always going to long to be home.
mm. Well, that's amazing. Yeah, even when you're sharing, thinking about our generation, and connecting back to language. I love that. I have that freedom to be able to start our conversation off. I'm introducing myself in our in our Hulkaminam language, and
Mm.
hearing you introduce yourself in the Hulkaminam, and it's beautiful, and that's a freedom that we have that now, where you looking back at our parents and grandparents, they didn't have that freedom. They were abused for speaking our language, and now we're, for people like yourself and some of the other stronger speakers, they're, I think of Kalila, she's doing
Yeah,
amazing work and
definitely is.
revitalizing the language. And I'm thinking of Candace, you know
Hmm.
uh, Bombo's Stotless, she's in the language program here,
Hmm.
studying and becoming a language teacher. And those are, just a few that we can name that are the people that are doing that important work. And like you're saying, it's very powerful. And in the work that we're doing here at Checking In, that's very much what we're looking at to bring to the forefront of the work we're doing. Is one, we're helping to bring that language and culture to all of the communities across Turtle Island. That's our hope and our dream,
Yeah.
and utilizing language and culture to promote healing for our people. And I was just thinking of my sister Roxanne, because we're slowly starting to do some work within her work. And we asked her, like, what would you want the focus of this app to be for your work? And she's like, right away she said the first thing, language.
Mm.
Language has got to be right up there, because that language and culture go hand in hand. And I
Hmm.
was just like, oh, that's beautiful. And yeah, we just did a soft launch with her work, and right away everyone was saying the same thing, like,
Mm.
focus on language, let's focus on elder stories. And there's just so many cool things like that are happening that I get to witness. And I'm really glad I have that opportunity, because yeah, to be able to share all of these things with all our people. And the other cool thing too is there are um some of our Siaya, our friends who have now called this place home as well.
Mm.
There are a lot of people out there who are interested,
Hmm.
and we have a few here on the island. My sister Daniela Pai, she's
Hmm.
one of her longtime friends and former colleagues. He's fairly fluent in our language,
Mm.
and that's just so powerful to see and to hear. That someone from outside of our community took that time to like build relationships, and took the time to sit and to listen and to learn. And not saying that it happened overnight. That was 2 decades in the making
Mm.
for that to happen. So
Oh,
mhm.
that's that's amazing work. That's amazing work. And I should credit as well, when I was talking about, the speaker that came in, it was Darren Good. And he
Mhm.
may not even remember,
Mhm.
the conversation he had with me. He may not even know or realize like the impact he had on me. But it was like,
Mhm.
I felt like he was talking to my spirit. And it was just like, I took those words and just decided, okay, and I'm not saying there wasn't any speakers in our big houses using our language. It's just to my understanding, that's all.
Mhm.
and it wasn't seen very much. And he really, yeah, his words really transformed me and changed my life. And just, yeah, hearing the work that the people you mentioned, Kalila, Candace, and Roxanne, just, yeah, it's such important work. And I'm just such a big fan of anyone that's gonna roll up their sleeves and do some of this work. It's so important.
Hmm. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, we're all doing our part to help revitalize and make sure that our language is around for future generations. And so yeah, hands raised to you, brother, for the work you're doing in that part. And
See.
yeah, and so as we're looking into our conversation, and I love for you to be able to share any words of advice for our listeners here at the Culture Healing podcast.
Yeah, I think, a word I didn't grow up hearing is reconciliation, right? But I didn't hear that word growing up, but it's talked about a lot now, right? But I think it's not that it wasn't happening before. I just think that there's, a term for it or a language
Mm-hmm.
around it, I think about, I think this could be for Huelmach people, even non-indigenous people, but I think about like, and it's more just, I want to talk about my grandfather because it's just the lesson that I saw there in him and the work that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Because thinking about like he went to residential school and he was basically beat on the first day he arrived for speaking his language. He didn't know any English, and you
Mm-hmm.
weren't allowed to speak the Huelmukan, right? You couldn't speak the Indian language, the native language. And so just a 5-year-old boy, and we all know the stories, right? Our families experienced it. This physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, sexual abuse that happened in these schools. And so my grandfather survived that, and despite all of that harm, he eventually reached a place in his life where he was on international stages. He had a very big spotlight, Chief Dan George, he was nominated for an Academy Award for his role in Little Big Man in 67. And despite like everything he went through, he had every right to be like angry, to be pissed off, and he probably was, but like when he did that work, you know, he did it with love and with compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And he was known even before that. He would travel around to schools in British Columbia, to rodeos, community events, and talk. And people would come to me and say, "Man, your grandfather, I was a little kid. He came to my classroom and he talked, and just what he shared with me, it helped me." And so I thought about that. Despite what our old people went through, and that's just one example. There are many others like him.
Mm-hmm.
They did things with love, and they cared. They cared about even helping white people to understand. They cared about our own people understanding our culture, and they did things with love, and they took care of each other. So I think if you're going to do this work, it's in our language, right? It's out in, tsetsoit, tsawit, all these different ways, terminology around helping. It
Mm-hmm.
tells you in our culture that being a helper or helping it's paramount. It's very important, right? So if we're going to serve our people, we're going to help our people. I think my message is always try to do it with as much love as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to, it's your Uncle Tom that told me this is no matter what you do, Gabe, whether it's spiritual work or you're going to go talk or you're going to go sing, you want to, after when you leave, you want them to feel better,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the main thing you want people is to feel better when you're done, right? And I think like, and that giving that love, giving that this coming with this idea that you want people to feel better, that is such a powerful currency. Because like my grandfather's been gone, since what was it, 81, and people still come back and be like, wow, your grandfather, he said this or he did this. So that currency, it doesn't die. It just
Mm.
keeps going and going, right? And so it's a beautiful thing. And I think in terms of reconciliation, whether you're a settler or you're a Huelmuch, like when I was first started doing language work, like Hunkaminam, there's like one fluent speaker. She's ni mitlit Quiquitlam. She was originally from Coquitlam, but she married in Snuneymuxw, and she was over 100 years old when I'd go to visit her. She was the only mother tongue speaker, the only first language speaker of Hunkaminam that we knew of.
Mm.
We heard that she had a brother in the United States, but we didn't know where he was. And so we'd go visit her. Other than that, there was no fluent speakers, and she passed away. She was over 100 years old, Josephine Good, and she would, teach us language. It was
Mm.
incredible. She had all her wits about her. But other than that, there was no fluent speakers. I think there's like four of us that are intermediate speakers of Hunkaminam, which is the same language as yours,
Mm.
Hulkaminam, and the same language up in the Fraser Valley, Hulkamalem, but just
Mm.
different dialects. So we're all one in that language, right? But our dialect is so. I when I started doing it, like I not metaphorically, I literally became depressed. Like I was depressed doing this work because I just thought like this is never going to happen. Like I just felt so depressed. And I had a couple people that helped me build the language program here in Tsleil-Waututh.
Mm.
One was Victor Guerin. He's my cousin from Musqueam. I come from the Point family through my late grandma, Amy. Her maiden name was Jack. And her, I guess it would be her great grandfather was Kayapalano. So I tie into several of the families there in
Mm.
Musqueam. So Victor Guerin, he was an intermediate Hunkaminam speaker. He agreed to come to Salilwatak, to Tsleil-Waututh and help us. And then I had a buddy. I also come from the Squamish Snatchum, the Squamish language.
Mm.
My grandmother was Squamish, my great grandmother. I have a lot of beautiful family, and it's a beautiful language. So actually, when I first started, it was this Squamish Snatchum that I was learning. I asked my buddy, like, where can I learn Squamish? I want to learn it. Like, it's one of my languages. And Dustin Rivers down in Cap is teaching out of his dad's house right now.
Mm.
He's now known as Chalsalem. He's the elected chief, or I think they use the word chairperson for the Squamish Nation right now. And so I went, and he was using this system of teaching. It was immersion based, not translation, and so it worked. Like I was remembering all these words, and I tried before and nothing. So I asked Chalsalem, who had this whole like when he does stuff, he's like a madman. He's like a mad scientist. He just lays everything. He has a map that goes almost to eternity. We're
Mm.
talking like hundreds of tabs open on his computer, just research, and he's got a mind on him. So he had all this work for Squamish language worked out, and I went to see him, and I'm like, "Hey, Dustin Salem, like, I'm gonna start building a Hunkaminam program, and what you're using, it's so effective. Would you come and help us build a program?" And
Mm.
he thought about it. He didn't answer me right away. Then he's like, "Yeah, okay, I'll come help you, but I'll only give you 2 years, okay?" And I said, "Okay."
Mm.
So we put him on contract. So here we are, like pre-MST, we're like MST language.
Mm.
For those that don't know, MST is like a Musqueam Squamish Tsleil-Waututh. It's like a business model we use for economic development. We take crown land and we jointly develop it. So here we were, MST for language. And so, like I said, I became depressed in this, and then um, Chalsalem. So I'm really telling a long version of the story, but Chalsalem, part of what he did to help us is he would travel and to different language learning communities. So he went to Ontario. The Mohawks were doing incredible work.
Mm.
Interior Salish in BC, in the Okanagan, incredible work. He traveled to the land of the long white cloud, the Maori people in New Zealand. And I don't remember the elder, but this is something again that just stuck with me. He came back and he said there was this older woman there, and she said that, any little bit of language that we bring back adds to the whole. And
Mm.
it just sort of took me out of that depression. I was like, wow, like, yeah, any little bit, it's making a difference, right?
Mm,
So any little bit of language we get back, it makes a difference. And then I thought about that in reconciliation. It can be so overwhelming, how many unmarked graves have they found now? Like, missing and murdered Indigenous women. Many of us know people that have gone missing, have
mm,
been murdered, some never found, some found. Many of us know people who die suspiciously, and it's just ruled as an accident or not suspicious. On and on, right? Like, it goes on and on. How many of us go into coffee shops and don't get treated very well? Like,
mm,
there's so many things, right? How do you reconcile all that? you know, it's like impossible. But I thought about that Maori elders teaching. Well, any little bit that we do adds to the whole. And so in that, I imagine like a basket, and anytime we do some language work or reconciliation work, we pick a berry and we put it in this beautiful basket. And so
mm,
I think that no matter what you do in this work, it makes a difference, and it moves us forward, and it repatriates, it reconciles, and it heals.
mm,
And those aren't my words. I'm stealing somebody else's line, and I wish I could credit them. I'll have to ask Khalsalam if he remembers.
mm, mm. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I know undoubtedly our listeners are going to be appreciating your words of advice as well, Haichika.
We'll see him.
Yeah, and as we're kind of looking at nearing the end of our conversation together, I'd love for you to be able to share about the work you're doing in Tsleil-Waututh.
Yeah, definitely. Like, as I you kind of gathered from you know the conversation. At one point, I was a manager of culture, and then I realized, like, we can't have culture without the language, so
Mm,
became the manager of language and culture. And before that, I did a lot of different jobs with my nation over the years, come and gone from the nation. you know and then I moved over to director of our treaty lands and resources department, and for about 5 years, and just upholding our rights and title, environmental, cultural heritage protection, archaeology, all that kind of stuff. And just recently, at the request of our leadership, our previous council, and our CAO, they wanted to really um, strengthen our culture, and they seconded me into a new role as director of language, culture, and protocol. So, I
mm,
mean, we're not at ground zero in the sense that, like, the language and culture is happening a lot in a lot of our departments,
mhm,
but we're at ground zero in this. At this time, I'm at ground zero in this time of, like, it's something that's also going to be new. And the idea is not just the cultural programming, the language. We want to bring, like, a huge, large scale cultural community center
mm,
in, so that we can host, all nations. We can host our families. We can
mhm,
have our weddings. We can have namings, whatever it is we need to do, right? Something that's very large scale, because
mm,
I think the healing of culture happens when we kaputhit, when we are gathering, right? And it's in that practice. Our elders call it yachwithit. We move around the floor in this direction, and that's, we're healing, right?
mm,
And so, and it's also about our own administration, respecting our protocols, respecting our laws, and then the proponents that we deal with as well, making sure they respect our protocols, respect our laws. And so that's sort of the task in hand. But in a way, like, I'm not at ground zero. A lot of it's happening, but at the same time, it is a new department, and
mm,
looking to build it, and probably looking to people like yourself, George, for allies to come in and help talk. I'm still kind of getting my feet on the ground. I know I mentioned it to you in passing, but I haven't forgotten about it. Just
mm,
kind of going through some steps right now and getting everything lined up. So that's kind of where I am right now.
mm. Yeah, Haichika, thank you for sharing. Yeah, and I look forward to seeing all the progress that you make and on behalf of your nation, look forward to, hopefully partnering together one day to walk alongside each other to do some of that good work together. And be really
Yes.
looking forward to that and appreciate that. And yeah, thank you all so much for taking that time to come and sitting and listening to myself and Gabe's conversation. And yet again, Gabe, thank you, brother, for your time today and sharing your words of wisdom and teachings with our listeners here on the Culture is Healing podcast. And I look forward to future opportunities to collaborate together. And thank everyone for your time and listening. And hopefully, I'll catch you all in the next one. Aichka, Ewer.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. I appreciate it. It's good to be here with you and all your listeners. Heights app kasi na si yeah. Heights app hours.
Aichka, Ewer.